Hi there, my name is Nicola James and I'm a psychologist and the founder of Lexxic. Today I'm having a discussion with Robert McClaren. Robert McClaren is the policy manager at Policy Connect.
Hey.
Yes,
good.
So what I want to do is just explore your journey and understand more about your relationship with neurodiversity. So could you tell me a bit more about your role with Policy Connect?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a policy manager at Policy Connect. So what that means is that since Policy Connect's a cross-party think tank, we work a lot with all-party parliamentary groups because those are cross-party structures within Parliament, tend to be co-chaired by a Conservative and a Labour politician. So I manage the all-party parliamentary group on assistive technology.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit more about what that group does around assistive technology?
Yeah, we started a little bit over a year ago, and we cover all assistive technology. We even have an event on early years, and we may do something on care later on. So we cover the full area, and that means that in all sorts of different policy areas, we're able to see that assistive technology should be part of the picture. And so there's lots of different departments of government and areas of policy where we wave the flag for assistive technology.
And can you tell me a bit about your experience of using assistive technology?
Yeah, I used assistive technology. Had the advantage of knowing what it was before I learnt about the opportunity at Policy Connect. I started using assistive technology at university, which I think is probably fairly typical, that I hadn't really had the opportunity to use it before that, and it was only with the Disabled Students Allowance that I got a chance to try it out.
Okay.
And it was huge for me, made a big difference.
So you obviously got the Disabled Students Allowance. Can you tell me a bit more about your relationship of why you use assistive technology in terms of relation to neurodiversity?
Yeah, I'm dyslexic, and for me, overwhelmingly, the main things are the sort of fairly classic ones of spelling and reading, and particularly spelling at this point. So it meant that just producing text that anyone else could read or that I could read after sort of 15 minutes coming back to it was very difficult. And assistive technology, the one that probably made the most difference, I've kind of experimented a bit with dictation technology, and I kind of go through phases a little bit with it. I'm actually on a bit of a dictation kick at the moment, trying it out. But the big one for me was vocalizing text, using text-to-speech. Yeah. Because then I could proofread, and because I could proofread, I could have confidence in what I was submitting as work. And I didn't have to ask anyone else to proofread for me, which was a kind of which is what I did throughout school. My parents were really good, but it's not something that you want to be doing at university. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I had the same experience in text-to-speech. It's like my mum used to proofread, and suddenly you're just more able to do it yourself, which is a huge independence, isn't it? So in terms of assistive technology, I know for me it made a massive impact. What was the difference of having assistive technology in comparison to before when you didn't have it? Do you find you're doing your work much more quickly? That type of thing?
Yeah, I really think that with just pen and paper, I couldn't do my job at all. And I don't think I could have done higher education. So I had pen and paper all through school. And then the combination of being able to type with a spell check, which I suppose is a form of assistive technology that everyone uses to some extent, and the text-to-speech completely changed it. Throughout school, any kind of written task in class, I just wouldn't be able to finish, and was kind of, I would sort of write down a couple of lines so that it looked like I wasn't sort of disobeying, but didn't finish. And then if there was some written homework, sometimes I would dictate it to my parents. But really the combination of being, on the one hand, reliant on somebody else to be a scribe, and on the other hand, incapable of actually finishing the task, meant that really the whole kind of academic side of life, I just wasn't really able to get going at all. And so being able to use a computer being able to spell check kind of by stages made me realise that I could do it.
And I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and I saw you got a first at King's in philosophy. So I know that for me, when I started to get my grades improved, and it made such a difference. How did it feel for you to get a first in your degree? You must have been so proud.
Yeah, I was really pleased. Well, I didn't go to university for a while because once I'd done with school, I felt, well, this isn't an area where I can, which sort of plays to my strengths, so I'll do some other things, and that was fine. But it did mean that I didn't go to university and didn't have the A-levels or GCSEs to go to university. So when I eventually decided that I would give it a go, before getting it first, I had to sort of get the qualifications to get in and try and do some work to convince myself that I'd make it once I got there. So I did an access course for a year.
Great.
And built some confidence by doing that.
And what gave you the confidence? Was that from the grades that you were getting or the skills that you were applying?
It was partly the grades actually. With access course, I decided I was able to use a computer at that point and touch type, even though I didn't have the text to speech yet. And I thought, well, at school, I couldn't sort of play by the rules, if you like, in terms of the way that work was marked. But maybe I can. I'm gonna make a conscious effort to not just write some things down that I'm interested in or kind of learn for the sake of learning, but almost actually be quite kind of tactical and look at all of the learning outcomes and all the rest of it. Jump through some hoops a bit academically, because that's something that I hadn't had the opportunity to do before. So I wanted to get a distinction in every sort of module, and there was one which I didn't, and I got bitter about it. But although it was kind of not totally necessary, because you didn't really need those marks to go on, and they'd only just introduced the marks and nobody was quite sure what it meant, and actually King's didn't mind either way. For me it was important, because I thought, well, if I do really well in this, then this kind of great unknown of what university was going to be would maybe not be quite such a big step up.
Definitely, and to be able to know that you can do that and to be able to achieve those grades, must be such a proud moment, particularly when you achieve your first from going to, whether you're not sure at university, to go into that place. It's such an achievement, so well done. So talk about your strengths. So I know that many people with dyslexia they might struggle with things like reading at speed or getting their thoughts down on paper. But what do you find, what gifts does it give you? What's your superpower? What do you find is your sort of strengths? What are the qualities that having dyslexia gave you?
I think maybe one thing that's helpful, whether or not it comes directly from dyslexia or just sort of experiences that you have, is I find that sometimes it can take so much concentration just to write some fairly kind of simple sentences that actually you get quite used to deep concentration and attention to detail, and so I can kind of zone out of everything else quite easily and kind of get into writing, and I really enjoy the writing part of my job, and the bits where I kind of lose track of things and forget to go to lunch and all the rest of it is a good day for me. And
how did I know your job is sort of very about making social change, looking at policies, and really sort of in taking the assistive technology and making sure that it helps people. Were you inspired by your experience of using assistive technology, and did that draw you to the role because of the difference it made for you? Yeah, I could obviously see the difference it made, and also see how much, whether or not somebody gets access to it is dependent on what policies are there. The disabled students allowance existed, and it was only because of that I even heard about it, that I got access to it. And it was around that time that there were some proposed changes to the disabled students allowance around the time I was graduating. So I thought, oh, here's this program that has meant a lot to me. There's a discussion about what its future is going to be, and that sort of drew me in. And I think the almost kind of practical approach that's taken
to neurodiversity and when we're thinking about assistive technology, because we're thinking about tools and what people can do to learn more effectively in ways that suit them, be more productive and so on. And it didn't have some of the kind of feeling of just sort of sympathy and all the rest of it, which is sometimes well-meaning but not really that helpful. So I kind of like the idea of people who use assistive technology themselves finding what works for them and kind of getting on with it. Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's also great with all the apps that are coming out now. There's so many different ways that people can use and access technology that helps them, and some of them are really low cost. So in terms of your life and your relationship with dyslexia and assistive technology, or people that you've just met in general, who's inspired you or who's helped you a lot, or who do you sort of admire, look up to? Who would that be?
Yeah, I've definitely had people who I've sort of treated as mentors, whether or not I've kind of named it as that with them.
And has that helped you develop your thinking and sort of the confidence in taking on such an inspiring role that you have today?
There's people that have definitely achieved really exciting things, and I thought, I want a bit of that. My dad is also very dyslexic, so growing up it was kind of good to see that he was able to, he's a teacher and that kind of I thought, well, I'm not getting anywhere here in this classroom, but somewhere there's somebody teaching the class and they're dyslexic, so maybe there's some hope there. I did work with diversity and ability not long after university, and there's people there who are doing really exciting things I had a chance to work with. I also, directly after university, heard about a Lexxic that had been founded by Neil Cottrell, who's dyslexic. And he found it out after university. Great. So there was me having just graduated, being kind of interested in assistive technology, being dyslexic, and I thought this person has been exactly where I am now and gone on to found this really interesting company. So I called him up and said, "Can you help me out? Can I intern at your?"
What do Lexxic do?
They have a piece of software that autocorrects spelling. So as you type, it changes the spellings. Brilliant. I quite like that approach because sometimes with assistive technology, it does something, but it allows the user to do something, but it requires of the user a little bit of a couple of clicks to do something, and that might not seem like very much, but when you're relying on that technology a lot, actually you're putting a lot of time into working the technology. Definitely. And this is something that kind of runs in the background a bit, and so kind of appealed to me. It seemed to me to have been designed by somebody who was themselves a bad speller. Something about the way that the model on which it worked.
Definitely, and if you understand it yourself, then you know how the other person feels as well. And talking about, you say you're experimenting with dictation at the moment. You talk about text-to-speech being really valuable for you. Are there any other apps that you've sort of looked at recently, or technologies which you found might be useful for other people who are experiencing dyslexia or neurodiverse conditions?
I think another one which is good to experiment with, because there's so much variety, is all of the kind of apps to do with organisation.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think there's all sorts of, for instance, to-do list apps. And you can't really know which one is going to work. It's just for you. It's just a kind of a feeling of whether or not you like the interface, whether or not clicking the I've done this button gives you the kind of sense of reward that those apps are supposed to give you. Yeah, definitely. So I do think it's good to try out a bunch of different things and be quite instinctive, I think, sometimes about what works, and don't necessarily worry about, well, somebody else really this worked for, but for whatever reason I'm not getting on with it, it's absolutely fine, and you can try a different one.
I know that like we've looked at organisation apps and I was like, oh, Trello, and I looked at Trello and I found that really useful, and I was amazed by how many people who aren't neurodiverse find it really useful too. So it's like, and you can just put things in, so I know, absolutely. So if you were sort of thinking of your younger self, so you are just, you haven't had assistive technology yet, you're deciding whether or not you go to university, what do you think, what advice would you give to somebody maybe in that position, or somebody who's, come out of university and is looking for a job and finding the right fit? What advice would you give them?
For university, I think I talked before about kind of reading all the learning outcomes when I was doing the access to HE.
Yeah.
In some ways that's a bit of a dry approach, but I do think that thinking about, sometimes people get a little bit overwhelmed by whether or not they can get their heads around the subject material, whether it's history or psychology or biology, and could spend a bit more time just thinking about what the course looks like as a course. And I found that being able to detach sometimes from thinking about philosophy, which was great fun, but also think, okay, but I need to think about what do they want from me, what as an essay, what's their kind of expectations of an undergraduate, what's their marking scheme. And then in a way, that kind of slightly more mechanical approach can be reassuring, because then you realise you're not being judged on your sort of pure intellectual ability to understand, English literature or whatever it is. Really, you're being judged on a set of tasks which are defined by people, and that you can kind of understand what the shape of those tasks is, and then set out some steps to achieve them.
Definitely, and I think that's such valuable advice, because I remember when I actually understood what a first essay structure was, I didn't understand what good looked like. When I saw an essay in a different subject, I was like, oh, so that's what they're looking for. So understanding what the best practice, the goal is, what good looks like, makes a huge difference to people, doesn't it? Because they're not working from that blank piece of paper or the unknown almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading the literature that they give you to read, you can read it as much with an eye to as an example of the kind of thing you should be writing, rather than not just the content.
Definitely. And what about the workplace then? Or going into work?
Yeah, I think one of the things about the workplace is that unless you're self-employed, and a lot of neurodiverse people do set things up, and I was self-employed for a while, but if you're within an organisation, then to some extent there are procedures that you're sort of expected to fit into. That you talked about Trello. In some organisations there is a project management app that everybody uses, and even if it's not that, there's all kinds of ways in which fairly arbitrarily the organisation has set itself on a certain work stream or workflow for doing certain things, and that can be quite difficult for people who are neurodiverse, because not all of those ways of working are going to suit that person. And so I think one of the challenges for work is thinking, I don't want to just blindly do what has been set out in front of me when it's not working for me, and then nobody wins in that situation. As an employee, people can get quite stressed, and the employer isn't getting the most out of the person that they've hired. But on the other hand, I think understandably people don't want to kind of come into work and say, well, everything has to change because of these are the different ways that I learn. And so there is a bit of a balance there, which is tricky, but I would, and maybe this is correcting for my own bias towards one of those two, I think it's good to be comfortable with saying, there's nothing wrong with the way that things are being done here, but this doesn't quite work for me, and then putting the positive spin of, if I could do it slightly differently, then I would be doing an even better job. And again, not necessarily having to have a good reason why something doesn't fit. I mean, the overarching reason is neurodiversity, but sometimes a particular workflow that might be set for people is just hard for somebody who's neurodivergent to get their head around, and they just have a feeling that actually if I did it in this other way, that would work better for me.
Definitely.
And who knows why, but that other way does work better, so why not, in a really positive way, where you're showing the benefits, talk to your employer and say, here's a sort of an alternative workflow that I've come up with.
Definitely. And you find that sometimes people might do mind maps and sort of maybe lists and things like that, and definitely I can see the benefit, and sometimes it actually creates more ideas because it's a different way of thinking, and it helps bring more creativity to that workflow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. It's really interesting to find out about your role, the assistive technology items you're working with the Parliament, and your journey. So I'd like to wish you well. Thank you for your time, and thank you for watching.